First, it was Bill Cosby. Then it was Nate Parker. Then Bill Cosby again. Then Anthony Anderson. Then Morgan Freeman. Then Paris Denard. Then Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Then Kareem Hunt. Then Reuben Foster. Then Kevin Hart. Then R. Kelly. Then Touré. And now Michael Jackson. Again. All but the most brain-dead among us has no choice but to agree that this is undeniably a concerted, organized white media offensive, and that its objective is to carpet bomb us with as many negative stories about black men and only black men as possible for the purpose of getting attention off the white sexual predators who are actually committing real crimes. Sexual harassment is how this whole thing started with Harvey Weinstein. Sexual harassment is about power. It's about someone who can hold your job or your promotion or your entire career/future over your head and use it as a means of trying to coerce you into sexual activity with them. It's sexual coercion, plain and simple. Well, there's no black men who have the ability to do that, which is why when you look past the white media's flimsy smokescreen, all you see are nothing but white males who are holding people's jobs over their heads in exchange for sexual favors. The issue is about power, specifically white power, which is precisely what the white media was created to protect. Now, it needs to be noted that the white media smear campaigns against Bill Cosby and Nate Parker took place before Harvey Weinstein, before the whole Me Too charade. But the reason that they were being publicly lynched is based on the same thing as all the black men have come afterwards. And out of all the black men named, only R. Kelly might have actually done something illegal. The rest of them, particularly Bill Cosby, were either shown to have been innocent of whatever nonsense accusation was thrown at them, or the matter never went beyond an accusation, never even got that far. Most of these black men who are being accused of stuff, these guys, there's no evidence of it. But if you take a look at all the white guys, there's not only is there evidence, but in the case of people like Les Moonves and Harvey Weinstein and Louis C.K. and Kevin Spacey, they've confessed that they did it. In the case of people like Jeffrey Epstein, they freaking had the case on him, but decided, you're a white man, so, we forgot, we're not going to prosecute you. These are show trials being played out in the press for the sake of trying to gin up a phony outrage campaign which can be used as a springboard to a possible prosecution. Oh, if this guy did something, we'll try to find a way to see if we can criminalize it. So we're going to be criminalizing Les Moonves, right? Nope. Louis C.K., he decides to masturbate in front of women, so we're going to be prosecuting him, right? Nope. Well, surely we're going to be going after Harvey Weinstein. Nah, we're just going to have him do a perp walk and then we'll dismiss the charges, same as a few years back. Second verse, same as the first. Up in Chicago, you've got Kim Foxx asking the public to come forward with anyone who has accusations against R. Kelly. She's soliciting accusations. Again, this is another white racist tactic. The white prosecutors in Florida were asking the public to surveil O.J. Simpson and to accuse him of something. The Montgomery County DA, Kevin Steele, was asking the public to make accusations against Bill Cosby. And now Kim Foxx with the exact same dirty play out of the same dirty playbook. Gee, has anyone seen Cy Vance, the Manhattan DA, asking women to come forward, any women who have accusations against Harvey Weinstein? Has he done that? Is that how he handled his prosecution? Was he soliciting accusations from the public like these white prosecutors and black ones, in the case of Kim Foxx, do against black men? Has he been trying to ask anyone, will someone please come forward and accuse this guy of something? We don't really have a case, so we need somebody to give us one. Did the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office ask the public to come forward with accusations against Les Moonves? All the women that Les Moonves has violated? This guy's a high-powered, high-profile corporate exec, and for some strange reason, these prosecutors aren't saying, well, we need people, anyone who has any accusations, bring your complaints to us so we can look into it. Has any DA, has any prosecutor anywhere asked anyone to come forward with accusations against Jeff Epstein? The guy was proven to have violated at least 60 females, possibly as high as 80. He was running his own freaking pedophile ring off of his private jet in his own private island, but nobody's asking the public to come forward with any accusations. Most of Jeffrey Epstein's victims happen to be keeping themselves hidden away, and nobody's telling them to come out of the shadows, come forward and make some accusations. Nobody's trying to build a case by random call-ins from the public. Nobody's opening up a tip line to try to jumpstart a prosecution for any of those guys. And of course the same goes for Kevin Spacey and Louis C.K. and Roman Polanski and Woody Allen and Bryan Singer and I'll Be Here Till 3 in the Morning. Yeah, all these high-profile white men, but none of these prosecutors who are so eager to solicit accusations from the public are doing it against them. Not even once. Not in any of their cases. Not even once. So no going to the public and asking them for leads, huh? A DA is not supposed to be soliciting accusations from the public. In fact, law enforcement normally tries to stay away from doing anything even close to that, even during a criminal investigation, because you get a ton of time-wasting lies, and resources have to be devoted to that when they could have been going to real crimes. Instead, it's going to be wasted on lies. But, as I've explained, the enforcement arm of white supremacy is making it clear that this is a racial policy. This is white supremacy making it clear we're taking the gloves off. We don't give a damn if you know about it. This is open warfare in your face. That's what it is. And they want you to know that. They want us to know that they're going to resort to soliciting lies in order to fabricate a case against black men. It's blatant, it's racial, and they want it to be in our faces. This is an expression of philosophy on their part. This is them making it clear that, well, any pretense of us not being full in the face with our punches towards you, all of that white glove slapping in the face stuff, we want to make it clear to you, the gloves are coming off. Yeah, we were slapping you around before, but now there's no holds barred. That's what this is about. The white supremacists have been emboldened. There was no case against Bill Cosby. There never was, but they successfully took empty accusations and took their own lies that they told about the civil proceedings. They were able to take their lies and say, well, this is what really happened. And they took their lies that Bill Cosby admitted to giving pills. Actually, he didn't. But they took their lies and they used their media to manufacture a phony outrage, which was actually meant to be nothing more than a justification for what they already planned to do. The media was not doing this as a means of trying to prompt a prosecution. The decision to prosecute had already been made. It's just a matter of you've got to prepare the minds of the public for the kind of skullduggery and cutthroat white supremacy racism that you're about to try to pull. And that's what the media campaign was about. It was about muddying the waters. Just carpet bomb, saturate the public in headlines demonizing and defaming and dehumanizing Cosby. And this is meant to put anyone who might question the prosecution on the defensive. We'll just lie and lie big and say, oh, he already admitted that he did it. He already admitted to it. Then they had a DA who took their lies, which blew up in their faces the first time around. The whole Bill Cosby was slipping people pills, that part had to be dropped from the retrial, but the white media didn't say that. Instead, they said he was convicted of drugging women. That is a blatant, slanderous lie. That's a libelous lie. Bill Cosby was not convicted of drugging anyone. The so-called charge that he was convicted of is so vague that practically anyone could be convicted of it. That's what they were reduced to. But of course, since this is a black man, when it comes time for sentencing, it's not going to be within normal guidelines. It's going to be just like with O.J. Simpson. Everybody knew that O.J. Simpson's little trip out there in Nevada to that prison cell, that was not him being convicted of any sort of charge that he had been hit with. This was the white folks deciding, well, finally we're going to punish that nigger for having gotten away the first time. He cheated us of our power. We felt insecure. This black man made us feel insecure for 20 years. He made us feel so insecure. He made us feel impotent as white people. And being white means you're supposed to be omnipotent. You're supposed to be all powerful. But this black man, he just got his neck out of the noose, and he made us feel powerless, and we're going to show nigger we've got power over you. They were waiting 20 years for a nothing burger. Even black people couldn't get too worked up about it, because the truth of the matter was O.J. Simpson didn't mean anything. The time to get O.J. Simpson was back in 95, not today. But it just goes to show that the white supremacists, whenever they have to take that L, these bastards seethe over it. It becomes an eternal scar on what passes for their rancid little souls. They will never, ever be able to wash the stain of O.J. Simpson's acquittal off of themselves. Hell, they could get O.J. Simpson lynched and castrated tomorrow morning. It still wouldn't be enough. They'd still feel like, but damn it, he got away though. Nothing will ever make them feel better. The white media and white prosecutors work together to manufacture lies. This is a concerted effort by both the enforcement arm of white supremacy and the propaganda arm of white supremacy. Taking their fiction, their fraud, their make-believe, their hoax, and trying to treat it as real. This is what the white media is about. They feel they have the power to make reality out of thin air. And Cosby is what they think that they're going to be able to use as a model to go after black men in general. With Bill Cosby, they feel as if now we finally have a working example. We have a paradigm. We have a model of how it is that we're going to be going after all these black men. And the reason they're going after black celebrities is you need high-profile black men. You need black men that you can point to and say, yeah, here's this nigger over here. You've been looking at his movies or watching his TV shows, and, you know, there's no good niggers out there. We just want to let you, he wasn't what you thought he was, huh? We're going to show you what he's really about. And, of course, the white public gets to feel validated in that, well, here this nigger is, and he's got more money than me or my kids or all of our generations will ever have. And, well, these niggers need to be taken down. Meanwhile, you got all the white men who are out there actually committing real crimes, and for some strange reason, this exact same public outrage just isn't there. It ain't about crime, folks. It's not about that at all. That's right. The reason that you slowcoats, you half-wits out there talking about R. Kelly, are you so stupid as to not understand that this ain't about R. Kelly? Obviously, yes. You're quite stupid. And the white media doesn't have to try too hard to get you to sell the soap. You're so doggone dumb, you'll take the soap out of their hands and say, here, anything for $1. This isn't about any sort of alleged sexual misconduct. This is about using these black men who they're lynching in the media as a proxy for black men and the society in general. And you can tell when you look at these black feminists, they're the ones who are too stupid for white code. They just come out and say, black men need to be stopped. Black men need to be this. Black men need to be that. Meanwhile, you're talking about Daniel Holtzclaw and Jeffrey Epstein and all the rest of them, and they're not that concerned. So what does that tell you? This ain't about protecting black girls or black women. This is about a bunch of self-hating, out-of-control, mentally deranged lunatics who have entered into an unholy alliance with white supremacy for the sake of going after black men because they see black men as being the embodiment of blackness. That's what black men represent to the black feminist. The black feminist does not want to be a black woman. She doesn't want to be black at all. She wants to be a white woman. And she wants to prove her bona fides to white supremacy by showing, see, we know what the rules are. The rules are that in order to be down with white supremacy, in order to get some crumbs from white supremacy's table, we got to show that we'll enforce the racial pecking order. And yeah, we're going to go after black people too. Well, so you're going to go after black men and black women? Can't go after black women. That would look kind of awkward. So instead, what we'll do is we'll just go after black men, those damn black men, these freaking niggers. I can tell you right now, these black feminists, they talk just like David Duke. These black feminists, they talk just like every white supremacist that you've ever encountered on the internet. Because they draw from the same well. They have the exact same mentality. They have a common psychological derangement with the white supremacist. So of course they're going to talk the same and have the exact same disgust and disdain for black people. They just use black men as a focus for it. But the truth of the matter is the black feminist, she has as much contempt for black women as any white supremacist out there. Because in her mind, as far as she's concerned, all of you little nappy-headed hoes, y'all are going to be trying to compete for white men, and I don't need all that competition for white men. After all, I'm losing to all these white women out here. I need less competition. And I can't do anything about the Beckys, so maybe I can do something about the Bushikas. That's where the black feminists are coming from. Well, the heterosexual ones anyway. The lesbian black feminists, well, the less said, the better. But this is what the white media is about. They use their media influence, the fact that they have a media megaphone, the fact that they are the ones who can use their position as the fourth estate in order to set the agenda The old saying that the media cannot tell you what to think, but they can certainly tell you what to think about, actually, that ain't true. With enough repetition, they can tell you what to think, especially if they censor any voices or any information to the contrary. They can use their complete and thorough unilateral monopoly in order to make reality out of thin air. There's nothing there, but they say that there is, and people are convinced that there is because they get told that there is over and over again. And Cosby is what they think they're going to use. Now, as far as they're concerned, they're not going to have another O.J. Simpson. Forget that. All these black men who they've been teeing up to get a quickie prosecution against, nah, we ain't going to have another O.J. Simpson. We're going to make sure that everybody understands we need some black men to be in handcuffs. We need some black men to go down. They're stacking the deck as much as they can. The media has long been called the fourth estate, and that means the fourth branch of government. And they're showing everyone that they're working hand in hand with the prosecutors and the police. This is a collusive arrangement across the board. All of these guys are working together. I've been telling you for years, if not over a decade now, about how the relations between the media and law enforcement, white law enforcement, are incestuous. How many people in the police department cycle into the media? And vice versa. How many people working in media cycle into law enforcement? John Miller of ABC News. This idiot has worked for like the FBI. He's also been a spokesperson for the feds in other capacities, worked for the LAPD, and of course he's also worked for the white media too. And the cross-pollination goes in the other direction as well. You got people in law enforcement who wind up going into media. It's a revolving door between the two. And that's not by accident. They work hand in hand. Do you think it's some sort of coincidence that with the white media, they always make sure that the crime blotter leads on every freaking TV, on every nightly news in your area? That's not because they think that hearing about some sneak thief, Jaquan the sneak thief, is apparently the most gripping and engaging thing, that the most compelling thing that they can start off the news with. It's a matter of, when it comes to media, people mostly remember what you say first when it comes to media. So you want to make sure you come out of the gate showing, here's these niggers, and in the news, the niggers are committing crimes. That's propaganda, and it's supposed to be propaganda. They know that it's largely overblown, and they also know that they're censoring all the white criminals, but that's the point. It's meant to be reassuring to the white powers that be, to the white community. It's meant to be reassuring to them that the media, the white media, is working squarely in their interests. They need a daily reaffirmation that white supremacy hasn't started to develop any stress fractures, that they haven't had any bricks taken away from that wall. They need that constant reassurance every day, and that's where attacking black people constantly comes in. It's their daily reassurance that, hey, nothing has changed. The entire mission of white supremacy has been to freeze the world the way that it is in order for the European to not lose the position with which he emerged from imperialism and colonialism. And they need to be constantly reminded that nothing's changed. We've frozen the world this way, and nothing's changed. The world has been held in suspended animation for the last 150 years, and we're going to make sure that it stays that way. So that's the reason why the nightly news is actually a beloved thing by the white community. They'll do some false complaining about the nightly news, these Negroes, but what they're really doing is they're reveling, they're celebrating. They're celebrating the idea that, these Negroes, they're at the very bottom, and you got a couple of guys, they're lower than us, and they're just so morally inferior to us. They're reveling in it. What they're saying is, this is perfect. So between the white media, the white government, and the white public, you have an iron triangle of racist deceit. The corruption is complete. And they're showing everyone that they're working hand in hand. And this ain't happenstance, folks. Some of you have been talking that stuff trying to find some eloquent, for lack of a better term, you've been trying to find some word babble that you can use to justify the idea that, things developed this way, as if it took a wrong turn, as if the white media was on the straight and narrow at some point, and then it just kind of veered off into this place. The white media, as far as you can go back, has always been anti-black. You can go back to 120 years ago during the lynchings. all the way up until the civil rights movement, the white media has always been anti-black. There has never been a single time, not a single day, not a single hour that the white media has not been anti-black racist. Not even once, but some of you will try to convince yourselves that, well, the media, I keep hearing that there's liberals who run the media, so they just took a wrong turn somewhere. It just kind of happened like this. Man, it didn't just anything. They're doing what they've always done. Their mission has not changed, their MO has not changed, and their target has not changed. This didn't just happen. Prosecutors are not reacting to what the white media has put out there. This is a program at work. It's not as if the white media says, hey, Bill Cosby, blah, 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 and the prosecutor goes, oh, we got a case. No, this was pre-planned. This is a formula. It is an orchestrated attack on black America, and each side, the media and the prosecutors, understand the part that they're to play in it. This is a script that they're working from. This is a formula that they're playing out. And this kind of fraudulent coaction by the media, it ain't new at all. This is standard operating procedure for them. This is actually their favorite ploy. Reminds me of the Spanish-American War. The newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst had one of his men in Cuba who was saying, nothing to report here, you know, it's all's quiet down here. We've been hearing that there was tension because William Randolph Hearst's man on the scene was saying that there is no war. And all Hearst said was, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. And this is yet another war. What you see the white media doing against black people, black men in specific, this is just another war. Albeit one the white powers that be have been fighting far longer and that black people haven't been fighting at all. The hand-in-hand collusion between the media and government is still the same as it was during the time of William Hearst. The propaganda arm of white supremacy has come under fire. They made this mess that they've gotten embroiled in. They also now need a distraction to get attention off of all these white men who are being shown to be rape-happy predators. They don't just need false accusations against black men, though. They need the accusations to be treated as if they're real. They need trials, and lots of them. They need the public to see a non-stop line of black men in handcuffs, a non-stop line of black mugshots, a non-stop line of black men being hauled into court and convicted or forced to get a plea deal. And of course the white media will pretend to give breathless coverage to what is a fiction they themselves masterminded and made up. They don't treat white men like this no matter what crime they commit. The white guy, you might hear what the verdict was a few months from now. But they're not giving you the play-by-play. They're not going to be having that as the lead on Entertainment Tonight or on CNN or anything else. They're not trying to make it where, oh, this is something we just have to devote time to. The reason they devote time to the trials of black men is because this is social conditioning. This is social engineering. This is programming the public mind. You're going to see this whether you want to or not because it's the only thing we're going to put on. We have to make sure that you don't miss it. This is something that we need to indoctrinate the public with, so we're going to have it where this is going to be the only thing that gets shown. Hey, what about terrorism? What about the employment decline? What about all of these other problems that the country faces? Those are unimportant. What's important is making sure that we hold white supremacy together, and that means the constant reassurance to the white public and the constant bonding exercise, which is what this is about. All of these white people who you see cheering on these public media lynchings of black men, they're not doing it because they think that these guys are guilty. This is a public bonding exercise for the white public. In fact, you can go all the way, this is nothing new by the way, you can go all the way back to the 19th century with the Haitian Revolution. When you had all of those white countries, including the United States, who were getting involved, trying to suppress the Haitian Revolution, trying to stop it, what do you think they were doing that for? Countries that didn't even have a stake in France's success. What was that about? It was a bonding exercise. In South Africa, when you had the whites invading and you had King Cetshwayo who was leading the Xhosa people against them, Xhosa wrongly called Zulu, but still. You had a whole bunch of Europeans down there, not just the Dutch and the British. You also had other European royalty, by the way. South Africa became a graveyard for European royalty when the Xhosa made a spectacular showing of themselves on the battlefield. But why were there all these different white countries, all of these white potentates and noblemen, all of these white high flyers who were in these places? Why? Because for them, abusing and attacking and killing black people, that's a bonding exercise. And all the way into the lynchings of the 19th and 20th centuries, the schools would close, the banks would close. It was treated like a freaking holiday. Everybody would go down to the town square to watch a black man being lynched. White Democrats, white Republicans, and everything in between. See, as much as your good white liberals will try to tell you that, well, you know, you should take a look at one of those pictures of a lynching. How many of those people do you think are liberals? Actually, probably about half of them. Because when it comes to attacking black people, all of that stuff that these white liberals talk, the similarities far outweigh the differences when it comes to them and these white conservatives, where black people are concerned. The rhetoric may not be quite as vitriolic, but it serves the exact same point. You call somebody a crime-committing, shiftless, immoral Negro, and David Duke says he's a nigger, that's a distinction without a difference. But this is what the white media has always done. They've always had this complete and thorough practice of making sure that black people are going to be demonized as a form of bonding exercise between the white leadership and the white public, or between members of the white leadership. They understand the importance of reinforcing those bonds. And as far as they're concerned, the perfect glue is the blood of black people. That makes for excellent mortar to hold together the wall of white supremacy. So that's what you see going on here. All of this need to have these show trials and make sure the public sees it. It's indoctrination. It's bonding. This is reinforcing white supremacy across the board on a multitude of levels. And since we live under white supremacy, the United States has nothing but unscrupulous prosecutors at the ready, willing to go to court with some half-ass prosecution if they think that there's just a chance. I mean, they win simply by getting the black man dragged into court. Doesn't matter if he did it or not. Look at Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart didn't even commit a crime, but the white media is acting as if, oh, he 5 dead, 10 injured. That's the way the white media is treating it. You would have thought that Kevin Hart was the one who committed that massacre at the gay nightclub down in Orlando. You would have thought that it was Kevin Hart who did that, the way the white media was acting about it. Meanwhile, Louis C.K. has yet again put another one of his hairy Neanderthal feet in his mouth. He's joking about sexual harassment, joking about the freaking perverted acts that he engaged in. But the white media is not making too much hay of that, because after all, we don't want to run that story too many times. People might think that there's something there and that we ought to do more than just run the story. So there's no shortage of courtroom whores like Kim Foxx who will push show trials based on fake white media stories, but only if the accused is a black man. That air of celebration, that air of, we're going to get this guy, they don't do that with white males. With white males, it's a matter of, oh, the downfall of Kevin Spacey. He was once so great and now this. Yeah, they're on one hand, they're lionizing the guy. They're canonizing him. They didn't do that with Kevin Hart. With Kevin Hart, it was just a matter of the black community has a gay problem. The black community has a problem with gays, and black people need to own up to it. And what's going on in the black community? Why is gay just the face of homophobia is black men. That's the face of homophobia. And of course, you got a whole bunch of black bootlicks out there, principally black feminists, who will help to go ahead and push that line. Time's Up was starting off leading the charge against black men in a big way, starting with R. Kelly, and of course hadn't taken long before they decided, well, now, we had a couple of detours. The Cosby thing was a kind of a detour, but now we're getting back to the agenda, which is make sure we have as many high-profile men held up as proxies to lynch in the media as possible. But I explained to you that Time's Up is a bought and paid for white media front. I showed you in one of my videos, you can find in the archives, the whole money chain going from men like Steven Spielberg and J.J. Abrams, but most importantly, the biggest contributors to Time's Up have been the talent agencies. I told you about Ari Emanuel, the brother of Rahm Emanuel, the current mayor of Chicago. If you think that the guys who are in the white media are liberals, you ought to see the pictures of Ari Emanuel at the White House shaking hands with Donald Trump. They understand exactly the fraud that they're perpetrating. You don't get it, but they do. It's these talent agencies. And who represents men like Kevin Spacey and Louis C.K.? But more importantly, who represents people like Kevin Hart? Who represents people like Tiffany Haddish? Who represents these black folks who will gladly throw other black people under the bus like Idris Elba's done behind? Who goes ahead and represents them? Who is it who's in the best position to tell empty-headed morons like Gabrielle Union and what's her name from Scandal to tell these idiots, you got to throw a little bit of dirt on Cosby. You got to say that there's a problem in the black community. So they never tell any of these white women. They never tell any of them to go and say there's something wrong with the white community. Nobody ever gets to say that there's anything wrong with white people. Nobody is going to be telling any Angelina Jolie stories about how she has a problem with what the white community is doing. I mean, they lost their freaking minds when Brie Larson said that there were too many white people who were movie reviewers. They lost their freaking minds. They thought heads were going to explode. And they put her in check real quick. She ain't said nothing like that since. They understand exactly how to enforce discipline in their ranks, and they understand that as white people, there are certain things you ain't supposed to be saying. But the talent agencies are able to put a bug in the ear of these empty-headed black celebs, which is why I keep telling you, stop looking to these guys to be partners in any black empowerment scheme, because these guys got their bread and butter from white supremacy. They've already been brain vetted. They've already had somebody look at them and say, do some brain typing and ask, is this somebody who we want around? Is this somebody who's going to be a reliable cog in the machine? Your black celebs, these guys were already on the freaking coon train a long time ago, and there are no stops between here and oblivion. As far as they're concerned, they're on that train to the bitter end. I showed you who it is who put together the money for Time's Up. The very individuals who themselves have been called out in the last couple of years. So what a surprise. These same guys who already knew that their names were going to be coming up sooner or later, they decided to launch a preemptive strike. That's what Time's Up was about. Let's get out ahead of this story. Before they can get around to pointing to us, let's just point the finger to as many black men as possible. Well, are we going to be looking at these talent agencies? I already told you about what was going on at Ari Emanuel's shop back when it was Endeavor before the merger with William Morris. I already told you about what was going on there. I mean, Terry Crews, he's talking about Adam Bennett, who grabbed Terry Crews' junk, but who does Adam Bennett work for? He works for William Morris. Ari Emanuel's shop. So you see now you can see what they're so concerned about. These guys do not want anyone looking at them. And the white media, which happens to be their allies, their colleagues, they own it. So it's not even a question of will the white media look at them. You're asking Ari Emanuel, is he going to use his media in order to indict himself? And he ain't going to do that. You need to understand just how dirty this is. See how it is that you're up against a vertically integrated white supremacist sphere. It's not a matter of how do we hit these guys from the side. It ain't going to work like that. Time's Up was the main mouthpiece trying to gin up a controversy against R. Kelly because this ain't an accident. This is all part of the plan. They did not come back to R. Kelly. They never left. The white media is just like any other organization, except collusion is illegal in other industries. Other industries are prohibited from trading information with one another or putting their heads together without telling their customers. Well, when it comes to the white media, that happens to be their stock and trade. These guys are always trading information with each other. And as we saw with the latest documentary smear against Michael Jackson, you have Britain's Channel 4 and HBO who work together to produce that pack of lies. And you got Robert Redford's Sundance Film Festival that's giving a platform to it. They're not vetting it. They're not looking and going, wait a minute here. Shouldn't we be a little more responsible for what we're putting out there? Like, oh, to hell with that. Makes you wonder about Robert Redford now, doesn't it? As if we have to. The white media understands exactly the kind of dirt that they're throwing. And they understand exactly what the ramifications of this are. They need to gin this up as much as possible. They need to hype it to the sky, fan the flames until you got a freaking out of control wildfire. Anything to keep attention off of the white men who are in the wrong. As far as they're concerned, hey, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about anything else. Let's talk about R. Kelly. Let's talk about Michael Jackson. Let's talk about Anthony Anderson. Let's talk about Kareem Hunt. Let's talk about the man on the moon. Let's talk about the price of rice in China. Anything other than white men. Anything at all. Now, other industries, they hide their collusion behind so-called trade associations, but the only thing that they ever associate about is how to arrange the market. How to best carve up the market like Hyman Roth carving up that Cuba cake in The Godfather Part 2. Well, the white media does the same thing. They put their heads together and decide who are we going to take down and how. Do you think that it's just the publisher of the, well, former publisher of the Washington Post who would have her colleagues over to her house? What do you think these people talk about whenever they have these little private dinners at one another's homes? Or whenever they have these whenever these guys say, let's do lunch, what do you think they're talking about? Here's a hint. They're not talking about what's going to be hot in the news tomorrow. They already know what they want to have out there. It's just a matter of them coordinating. That's what they do. They get together and coordinate. Hey, we're going to be running a story about XYZ. And we really need to get some heat off of my friends or I need to get some heat off of my son. These guys all engage in the exact same activity. The white media is monolithic because white culture is monolithic. White supremacy is monolithic. It is just this ugly thing in front of you. There is no variation to it. There is no variety. There's no anything. Just this one perfect ball of perverted dysfunction. That's what white supremacy is. Totally and completely monolithic. So those who are adherents of white supremacy, they cannot act or react in any other way. They're monolithic. They're all going to do the same thing. They all operate out of the same playbook and for the exact same purposes. And that's the reason why when these guys do their dirt, of course they're not going to have any new ideas. No imagination whatsoever, because white supremacy isn't about being imaginative. White supremacy is largely about being loyal to an evil system. So these guys, there's not a real need to do a whole lot of selling when it comes to how are we going to put our heads together or justifying scapegoating black men. They all understand the danger that they're exposed to. They're looking at Les Moonves and they're not looking at him and going, oh, Les Moonves, always knew he was a creep. They're looking at Les Moonves and going, oh my God, if they can get Les Moonves, they can get the rest of us, because practically all of them are engaged in the exact same behavior. The head of NPR, Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer, Tom Brokaw had some accusations against him, but the difference between Tom Brokaw and Tavis Smiley is you had a whole bunch of white women getting out there, Rachel Maddow and others saying, oh, no, not Tom Brokaw. Wait a minute, whatever happened to we must believe the women? No, we believe them when they're white, and that's how blatant they're being about it. You accuse a white man of wrongdoing, well, some women do lie, ain't that what Lena Dunham said? And, well, we can't just believe every accusation. This is going too far. Meanwhile, you accuse a black man, none of them were saying, well, we got to ask some questions about the accusations against Tavis Smiley. We got to ask some questions about the accusations against Morgan Freeman. We got to ask some questions about the accusations against Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. They didn't do that. All of a sudden, it wasn't going too far. So a few weeks ago, with Tom Brokaw, it was going too far. We don't want to just make it where we're throwing accusations willy-nilly, Then the next day it's Morgan Freeman. Well, we need to look into this. We really need to look into this. So which one is it? What it is women lie when they're accusing white men, even if you got audio, video, and printout. If you got a freaking confession from them like Les Moonves and Louis C.K., well, that still doesn't mean prison time. Doesn't mean we actually do anything about it. Meanwhile, you got complete fictions being told against Anthony Anderson. And, well, we got to look into this. You have a complete lie being told up against Reuben Foster. Well, we got to look into this because he's black. And if it's a black man being accused, you believe the women. But if it's a white man being accused, that's up for debate. Women do lie. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. How much more blatant do you want them to be, folks? Even if you're a brain-dead moron, in other words, one of the black bootlicks, then you still have to admit that the white media is completely and thoroughly taken over with groupthink, and that's if you want to be as charitable to them as possible, and I don't know why you would. There is undeniably an ideological litmus test that the white media and white supremacy in general require you to be under if you want to pass muster with them and be accepted into the fourth estate. You want to make it into the walled city of the white media where you're going to have to show them that you subscribe to the exact same anti-black hatred that they do. They litmus test you. Call it whatever you want. Brain typing, what have you, but the point is, when they do their vetting of you, they're trying to make sure that you're going to be a reliable cog in the machinery of racism, white supremacy. And everybody knows what the standard of white supremacy is. Are you attacking black people? That is not merely the MO of the raison d'etre, it is the justification of white supremacy, a self-justifying act. You see story after story after story of white people in the white media at all levels, openly engaging in anti-black racism. It's a never-ending flood of local TV anchors and local TV staffers and radio hosts and TV general managers and national network personalities, and even the heads of these white media companies engaged in all manner of racism. You had that woman over at CBS who got caught doing some racist garbage against black women. I mean, it's from top to bottom. Al Roker may apparently think that all this garbage, because he's trying to hold on to his job, he understands that they don't give a damn. They'll throw him out the freaking door. Only reason he was allowed to stay around is because he's reliably kissed their white behinds. So he's looking and going, what the hell else am I going to do if I don't do this? So he may feel that it's in his interest to run interference for racist meteorologists, but the rest of us are supposed to have more sense than that. They all circulate, these white racists in the white media, they all circulate from one white media outlet to the next to the next. And for some strange reason, they all seem to fit in wherever they go. Have you noticed that? The white media tries to make it seem as if, well, you know, people don't just fit in anywhere in the white media. That's bullcrap. Roger Ailes spent most of his life working for and benefiting the so-called liberal media. And you look at people like, say, Alison Camerata over at CNN. She was on freaking Fox News. And you know, the freaking revolving door between the so-called liberal media and the so-called conservative media, that thing's just going 24/7 like a fan. Just people going in and out, out and in and out, out and in. Just like the connection between law enforcement and the media, revolving door, in and out and in and out and in. The people who work in the media are perfectly interchangeable in the white media because they all have the exact same training. And I'm not referring to technical training. I mean ideological training. They know what their job is. And it's not to inform or entertain the public. Their job is to promote white supremacy's value system. That's the job of the white media, full stop. Now you can go ahead and be slick about it with, say, white dramas and TV shows, but they're still feeding you the exact same poison. It's just a matter of a lot of you turn your brains off and you tell yourselves it's just entertainment when it's not. Even Colin Muhammad told you that. You keep letting these white folk tell you it's just a movie. Now you go ahead and you take some of the exact same behavior that they do against black people in these movies, and you go ahead and you let a black person do that to a white person in a movie, they'll lose their freaking minds. You have white people, their heads ready to explode because of Black Panther. Oh, you're going to be showing an image of Africa not on its knees, at least not visibly anyway. You're going to be showing an image of Africans who are technically sophisticated, the most sophisticated, highly technologically advanced society on earth is black. And you have these white supremacists going nuts. They weren't going to have anyone tell them it's just a movie. You had a black stormtrooper and they said this is white genocide. Really? So if you cast a black man in a Star Wars movie, that's the same as wiping out an entire group of white people. Really? But this is where they're coming from. That's the ideology at work. That's the delusion at work. That is the mental derangement at work. The white media is monolithic. If you met one, you met them all. They draw from the exact same well, or should I say the exact same sewer, They draw from the exact same toilet. They pretend to be separate entities the same way that the Republicans and Democrats pretend to be separate, but once you ignore their rhetoric, the pathetically false claims that they're in competition with one another, you see that they cover the same stories and they ignore the same stories. You see, as Dr. Noam Chomsky brilliantly put it, the most sophisticated form of propaganda is when something tries to present itself as opposition when in actuality it's actually support. Their job is to shape the public mind. Whenever you see the white media or white government pretending to have an argument about something, and I explained to you the whole border wall, just to take as a case study that's in people's minds, the whole idea of the border wall debate is meaningless. Most of the illegal aliens don't come across the Rio Grande or sneak across the land. Most of the illegal aliens in the United States got in legally. They overstayed their visas. That's how the vast majority of them got in. These are people who were allowed in legally and then didn't leave. So the border wall is a non-issue. So why the world do you have all of this Sturm and Drang about it? Because that's the whole point. This is social conditioning. You want the public to think that the border wall is a life and death issue, and I can promise you nothing's going to come of it because the issue is not supposed to be settled. This is not about doing that, because once you put up a border wall, if they actually did put up, say, a 50-foot high border wall that's 10 feet deep, that's about 10 feet, that's a mile deep so nobody can burrow under it, if they would make this thing 10 miles thick, that wouldn't matter to anything. It wouldn't change anything. It's not supposed to. They would never want that to happen, because once that issue has been resolved, it goes away, and they need it as a distraction. That's what the border wall is about. It's a distraction. And what is it meant to distract from? It's meant to distract from the real problem. The real problem happened to be the businesses and the landlords, almost all of them white, who hire these illegal aliens, which is what acts as a magnet to draw them here. They know that they're going to have some unscrupulous white businessmen who are going to offer them jobs because they'll work for slave wages and help displace black people. And they also know that there's going to be landlords who are going to decide, hey, have cash, we'll rent. They know that there's going to be a place where they can hang their hat for the night, and also somebody willing to give them some money. And unless you're going to get serious about going after the white businessmen and the white landlords and the white corporations like Wells Fargo, if you start cutting all of those means, start going after the money, you start making it where the illegal aliens can't get jobs because their employers are all locked up. They can't get any sort of housing because all the landlords are locked up who try to rent to them or try to do any sort of renting to them. You make it where the big corporations like Wells Fargo are no longer allowed to engage in that kind of remittances garbage, the wire transfer scam that Wells Fargo's been running through Western Union for the longest time. They know what they're doing. They know damn well what they're doing. So you make it where these guys are not able to have the financial safety net that's been propping them up. You take all that away, you solve the problem. But in order to do that, you got to punish white people. And you have to punish white people who are businessmen, which also means that they're part of the donor class. They're the kind of people who both Republicans and Democrats rely upon for political donations. These are the people who actually make policy because they got the money to make policy. Look at the airlines if you doubt me. Look at Big Pharma if you doubt me. Look at Big Oil if you doubt me. Look at Big Tech if you doubt me. Look at the white media if you doubt me. The white media is one of the biggest campaign contributors on the planet. You want to know why it is that neither Republicans nor Democrats are trying to drag any white media figures into Congress and say, we're going to have some show trials, we're going to have hearings and force you to testify under oath? You want to know why it is that the Republicans never decided that they were going to get together any committees for the sake of having show trials against the white media? Drag in some of those guys from CBS. Yeah, you guys, you try to act like you're so liberal and so open-minded and so progressive. We're going to show the world what you are. We're going to make you testify against yourselves, and we're going to put it all on TV. The Republicans never did that because they understand that it's a game, it's a fraud. When they pretend to be enemies with the so-called liberal media, they understand exactly the fraud that they're pulling. They're not enemies at all. They're best friends. The enemy is not the liberal media. The enemy is you and me. We're the enemy. These guys just try to play us off one against the other, whipsaw us one against the other. That's what Dr. John Henrik Clarke was talking about. I always go back to our grandmaster teachers because these brothers and sisters had it all figured out. They understood exactly where white supremacy was coming from. Anytime you see the white media having one of these political footballs that they're kicking about, the only thing you got to do is ask the question that Dr. Clarke told you to ask, which is, are they discussing anything that would require white supremacy to give up any of its power? No matter how the whole border wall thing turns out, if you actually look at the facts, you find that there's nothing about it that would require white supremacy to give up any of its power. White supremacy does not lose power either way. The border wall is not stopping illegal aliens from getting in. So that being the case, not having a border wall doesn't mean anything, and having it wouldn't mean anything. And when you look at the fact that these Hispanics, by and large, have all of this anti-black hatred for no damn reason other than the fact that nothing's worse than a wannabe. They are wannabe whites. So that's where they're coming from. When you look at that, you understand that even if you get overrun with a whole bunch of Latinos, well, the Latinos have already shown that they got an application in to be part of Team White Supremacy. So no matter how you slice it, border wall, no border wall, whether you throw all the Mexicans out or whether you let them all in, it doesn't matter. It doesn't require white supremacy to give up any of its power. The only time the white supremacy has ever been even imagined to have to relinquish any of its power is when black people were the ones making the demand and when it was in the interest of black people. The closest approximation to anything resembling a just society that this country could have had happened to be during Reconstruction, and we all know how that turned out. That's when you got your black universities. That's when you had your black sheriffs. That's when you had all these black representatives in Congress. You had something that was starting to look like it could have actually been a civilization in America. So they had to stamp that out, but quick. You need to understand that. Black people tend to project onto white politicians or white media whatever it is that we want to believe. And these beliefs that we have are fairy tale pie in the sky. We have a whole bunch of delusions that we're trying to find a way to justify. We don't want to have to take up the responsibility of wielding power, so we're trying to find somebody else who hopefully will do everything for us because we've been too just completely and thoroughly drained and warped, and we have been stripped of any idea of power to the point now where we don't even want it. And for a lot of black folks, it would be dangerous to put power in their hands because they wouldn't know how to properly wield it. This is how Barack Obama, by the way, got away with all manner of empty rhetoric for so long. He never promised black people anything, but black people conned themselves into thinking that all of his soaring rhetoric, all of his flowery prose, somehow meant that he had pledged to do something for us when he never did. Well, black people also engage in the same type of magical thinking where the white media is concerned too. We're so desperate to believe that someone in the white majority is going to challenge white supremacy. We want to believe that the white media is going to challenge white supremacy when they are the mouthpiece for white supremacy. We have been drained of spirit, and in large case, we've given up our autonomy. We're not even trying to get back our black steel, our black force of personality. We're not even trying to get it back. I guess we've been on our knees so long, to us that feels normal, and it's not. We're so desperate to have someone speak the truth that we allow the white media to put out what is at best only lukewarm advocacy for us, but then they make sure to knock it down or to discredit it. They always make sure that it's a stacked deck with a black puppet or a white liberal who pretends to be saying the truth but is clearly insincere and doesn't mean it, and they're not making an argument, they're just giving token resistance, completely and thoroughly predictable and meant to be knocked down. It's a show that they're putting on. It's a performance. It's just another white TV show. Anytime you see the white media allegedly talking about race and they don't have anyone from the New Voices of Black media there, they don't have somebody who's bringing that truth, you know what the truth is. If they bring up one of the usual suspects, then you know what's going down. It's the white media's favorite TV show. It's called Here's What Black People Think and Here's Why They're Wrong. That's the show that the white media is putting on. Anytime that they're supposed to be having any sort of coverage dealing with race, That's what the white media's discussion on race is, just a pre-planned script. This is what the niggers are thinking, and this is why they're wrong. It's meant to be a comforting validation of what the white majority wants to see and wants to hear. And here we are desperately hoping that the white media that orchestrated and created all of these stereotypical anti-black tropes is somehow going to challenge them. Why? Why would they do that? Why would they? But this desperation on our part, it's because we refuse to deal with our own total lack of self-worth and, truth be told, for a lot of us, our own laziness. Black people are the bare minimum people, always trying to figure out what's the very least that I can get away with. What's the bare minimum that I can do? That's part of the reason why black business with one another turns out in too many cases to just be a disaster, if not a disappointing and frustrating joke. Too many black folks are not trying to do business, they're trying to figure out what can I get away with. Can I do the bare minimum? You cannot have successful business unless you do the absolute maximum. If you're worried that if you're telling yourself, have I done enough, that means you ain't done enough by half. That's what it takes. How are you going to have total commitment to your people when you've been spending so damn long practicing how to be the bare minimum people? How are you going to topple the most evil, strongest, pernicious force the world has ever seen if you think you're going to do the bare minimum? Well, let me go ahead and wisen you up. Let me smarten you up. You are not going to topple white supremacy or even be able to scratch white supremacy by doing the bare minimum. White supremacy is too organized, it's too strong, it's too dense, and it has too many people looking to prop it up and stand it back up again if anybody comes against it. You want to go against white supremacy, you got to go all in. Ain't going to be no bare minimum anything. But unfortunately for black people, we're trying to figure out how to be the bare minimum people. We don't have our own media because we don't think that anything we have to say is worth anything unless it's been validated by the white majority. That's our problem. The laziness, the lack of a sense of self-worth because we need white validation, these are toxic, disastrous practices that we've taken onto ourselves. We better throw them off. And the time is short because white supremacy is sharpening its knives. They're looking for a 100% solution to the Negro question. But this idea that black people, that nothing we have to say is really valid unless white people have given us the golden nod. This is why so many of the old black media outlets immediately sold out. As soon as they sold 5 or 6 copies, they immediately started looking for some white support that they could get. They were trying to cross over. They were trying to transcend race. Because that's the whole reason that they were started for. They were started by some black folks who were trying to figure out, how do I use this as a springboard to get attention from white people and somehow be a satellite of the white media. That's what these black outlets want to be. They want to be, even if the ones who you want to give credit to, and I can't imagine any who you would, but even the quote-unquote best of them, what they wanted to be were satellites of the white media. They wanted to be satellites to white media corporations, satellites to white business interests. Oh, we need some ads. Don't you know black people buy cars too? We need some Ford ads, and we need some toothpaste ads, and some, oh hell, why don't you have some radio ads? Black people love radio. That's what these old black media outlets did. So in their never-ending, insane quest to become satellites of the white media, they decided they were going to sell out you and me. And that's kind of a point that I can't really overemphasize. I can't really mention that enough. Do not think that it's some victimless crime whenever you patronize garbage media like BET or TV None or World Star Hip Hop or any of the anti-black websites like The Weed, some of you may know them as The Root, or The Griot or Blavity or any of Madame Noir, any of the other garbage. Do not think that it's a victimless crime whenever you call yourself having anything to do with them. These guys are auxiliaries of white supremacy. That's why we got to stay on their necks. That's why I cannot afford to allow you to forget that they are the enemy too. Yes, ABC's the enemy, Disney is the enemy, Viacom's the enemy, AT&T's the enemy, and so is the griot, so is the weed, and so is Madame Noir and all the rest of that garbage. These guys are the enemies. Not all your enemies are going to be people who are blonde-haired and blue-eyed and spouting racism. A lot of them are going to be people who have skin the same complexion as yours, color the same, hair the same texture as yours, and yet they'll get up in front of that camera and spew the anti-black rhetoric like it ain't nothing. All we are left with is a massive white media carpet bombing us with hate nonstop, and we've got no voice with which to fight back except for the new voices of black media. And the stuff that they're doing against R. Kelly, don't you know that that's just supposed to embolden what happens to you in your everyday life? What they do to R. Kelly at the top meaning the highest earning people at the highest profile level, it's also to set the stage for the mentality of the people who you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. As far as they're concerned, they know that it's a game, it's a joke. Hey, look what they're doing to R. Kelly. Ain't this funny? Hey, there's this nigger on my job, or there's this nigger we got this contract with, there's this nigger coworker of ours, and you know, can you believe he had the nerve to look me in the eye? And he talks a little bit too confidently, you know. This guy, he just seems a little uppity. He needs to be knocked down a peg or two. Hey, Susan, why don't you, say something? Oh, I felt so threatened. We all know how that one ends. That's what's going on here. It is reinforcing a value system, and that value system is not merely held by the highfalutin A-rated bond-holding fat cats at the top, is not merely held by the 1%, is not merely held by the well-heeled, deep pockets, is not merely held by the rich and famous at the top, it's also the people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's what's happening. It is a cross-the-board validation, a bonding exercise that takes place at all strata of the white community. And it's also having very hard impacts for black people. Any black man who gets accused of any sexual impropriety, you better believe the exact same script that's played itself out with R. Kelly and played itself out with all the rest of these black men. That's what happens too. This is a way of teaching and reinforcing the white supremacist value system. That's what it's about. We're left with nothing but one sole voice, the new voices of black media. So you gotta be here, okay? You don't need to be fooling with anything else. You don't have that luxury. We need to have a substantive voice with which to counter-program against the white supremacy's propaganda. Instead, outside of the new voices of black media, all you got are a few broken sellouts who we have to fight with day in and day out as well. So this is why we're going to keep our foot on the throats of the old black media. They are every bit as much our enemy as any racist white media outlet you can think of. The old black media's job is to be white media's yes men. Whatever anti-black crap that white power throws out there, the old black media can always be counted on to say, well, those white folks do got a point, you know. And ain't that what always happens with these good black all these good black bootlicks, all these bed wenches and bed bucks and all these bootlicks? Isn't that what they always do? It seems as if there's no anti-black argument that you can raise. There is no bit of white media propaganda. There is no smearing of a black person that you can't find these black bootlicks who will co-sign it to some degree or another. They may not go whole hog for it, but they do go for it. A white media who lies about us, demonizes us, dehumanizes us, and they're doing it for the sake of being able to push policies meant to attack and kill us in the real world, to justify hurting black people, to rationalize harming black people, black men in specific. They're the ones who put out this torrent of racism against us. And you got black people trying to make excuses for why we should take this lightly. Black people are all talk. We're used to running our mouths simply because. We don't value power. We value attention. And we're the bare minimum people, so running our mouths is the most that a majority of us are willing to do. We don't care about results in the real world. Too much work. And besides, why bother with that power and influence stuff? That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. What can I get for the bare minimum? Well, I can get attention for free, and all I need is swag, and that doesn't cost anything either and doesn't take much effort. You see a black person talking, there's a 90% chance that that's all it's going to come to, talk. They're not trying to do anything. To black people, that's all that words are meant for. So we think that because we only use words as a means of getting attention for ourselves, that apparently everybody else is that way too. The white supremacists must be that way too, because hey, that's all it means to us, so surely that's all it means to them. We simply don't understand that there might be a group of people out there who look at words as a means to an end and not simply an end unto itself. And when you have a contingent of black people who lend their voices to efforts meant to attack and kill us, that ain't just talk, folks. What you see these black bootlicks doing, co-signing the white media's attacks on us and running interference for them, and being the black people who will get out there and say the black community has a rape problem, the black community has a sexual assault problem, and these black men, black people are just afraid to talk about it. What you're doing is you're saying black people have a shared moral flaw, and that black people are inherently criminal. Black people are inherently immoral. Black people are also inherently weak of character. So we need white people to punish all these black men because black people just are so morally deficient. We don't know the difference between right and wrong. That's a script they've been saying for the longest time. You can go all the way back to the 19th century with your good white suffragettes that so many of you black women want to be like. And they were, even if they did do something that was supposed to be helpful to black women, they would always make sure to include some sort of backhanded compliment with it, or just some flat-out insult with it. They never could just be helpful. They always had to say, yeah, because we know you niggers need it. That's what's going on here. That's what these black bootlicks do. They justify the white racist line of black people are morally deficient, morally inferior. And that's why they need us to come in and roll hard on these black men, because all the black community is under siege by all of these rape-happy black men. They're not under siege by all these white cops killing black people. They're not under siege by all these white politicians who are putting in place laws that cut us off at the knees, and definitely not. We are not at threat from these white corporations that are redlining us and attacking us daily, gentrifying us out of existence. We're not. That's not the real threat. The real threat are black men. And we know because we paid some of these bought and paid for bootlicks to say it. That's what they're doing. They're reinforcing the white supremacist line. That comes straight from freaking David Duke and Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor. That crap about the black community has all sorts of rapists running around, and the black and these black feminists who are playing into the white supremacist canard that the black community needs to be policed by white people. That's all they're about. That's exactly the line that they're pushing. The black community needs to be restrained. The black community needs to be held in check because they're so out of control. Why? They want us to crack down on them. Ain't that what Bill Clinton said? Why, when it comes to the 3 strikes and the Rockefeller laws and mandatory sentencing guidelines, it wasn't me. I didn't want. It was all these black preachers. You see, all these black people. Why they wanted us to crack down on them. That's what it was. You see how that happens? The times may change, but the lies and the liars remain the same. And don't get me wrong, the old black media, these clowns are too weak and feeble to be a force multiplier. They'll never be any sort of force multiplier. We've been busy gutting these scumbags to make sure that any sort of force they had is blunted. But the problem is white media controls damn near the entire media landscape. They are a force multiplier unto themselves, with the sheer scope of the number of white media outlets that they control, and the amount of people that they're able to reach. They don't need the black bootlicks to multiply what they say. They've got all the force that they need. The white media has all the force multiplication that it may need. But what they don't have, what they desperately need, is legitimacy for these anti-black policies that they're trying to prop up and tee up. They need legitimacy for it. And that's what the black bootlick class does for them. Sure, it's totally false and manufactured out of whole cloth, but this is about social engineering, and the majority of the population are not looking to question white supremacy. They're merely waiting for their next marching orders. And that's what the white media provides them with. The black bootlicks are a reliable black face that they can push out front whenever anti-black propaganda is on tap. Whatever anti-black racism the white media is serving up today, you can bet that these black bootlicks will be gladly standing there saying, "Oh, master, let me serve it to the people for you." And this is a threat to all of our lives. What you see them doing with these black men, this is meant to be part of an overall strategy of shaping the public consciousness. It ain't about, can we stop R. Kelly before he strikes again? If they were really so concerned about protecting the black community from sexual assault, they could make sure that they show people what Daniel Holtzclaw was doing and make sure to publicize that. If they really are concerned about securing the safety of black women and girls, you can start by making sure that all these cops who are out here killing black females like Aiyana Jones, like Rekia Boyd, like Renisha McBride, and I'll be here till 5 in the morning, make sure that these guys get punished. You punish them hard enough, often enough, and stay on their necks, you can stop it. But see, when they say we got to protect black women and girls, what that means is we have got to make sure that black women and girls are used as a smokescreen in order to justify attacks on black men. And we're not protecting them from anyone who's white. We're not protecting them from any white attacks at all. Every white racist out there can have a go at black women. Dylan Roof, most of his victims were black women. But you don't see Jamila LaPuke talking about that. You don't see Amber Phillips talking about that. You don't see Goldie Taylor talking about that. You don't see Agent DuVernay talking about that. You don't see So Full of It Nelson talking about that. You don't see Sleaze Merritt talking about that. It's only if a black man shows up and they think that they can get some crumbs off of white supremacy's table, then they got something to say. And the ability to manufacture a phony controversy is made a lot easier than ever because while there's less media outlets than ever before, their reach is greater than it's ever been. The media's ability to reach people is now at the highest level in human history, and they can do it instantaneously. Virtually every word you read and every image that you see is brought to you by only one of 4 companies. The number of media companies has shrunk to an all-time low. You don't have 8 to 10 major studios. You don't have 500 TV channels. All you've got are just 4 media corporations. That's it, just 4 media companies. Doesn't matter if it's television, movies, or radio. Virtually all broadcast and visual media is owned by one of 4 entities. But when you look at these companies' track records on anti-black racism, it becomes undeniably clear that even the 4 companies is giving them a little bit too much credit. You're up against one mindset. When you look at the amount of people who have switched from one white media corporation to the other, you see that practically everybody winds up working for one of the 4 big companies, and in fact, a lot of them have worked for all 4 of them. You look at their freaking resumes, you see that they've worked for either the parent company or one of the subsidiaries. And this is supposed to be what constitutes a free market media? This is supposed to be what constitutes some sort of free press? 4 companies that act as an oligarchy. They all have the exact same ideology. They decide that they're going to protect one another from scrutiny. They all decide that there are certain stories that they're going to run of a necessity and make sure everybody's flooded with it, whether you want to see it or not. And there are other stories which they will not allow anyone to see. Whether it's Disney, Viacom, News Corp, or Time Warner, AT&T, they all have the same ultra-aggressive hostility towards black people. And it's not just a recent thing. These guys, their racism goes back decades. It's part of their company culture, part of their corporate DNA. So there is definitely groupthink going on here, but like all groupthink, it's no accident. None of them challenges or even mentions the openly blatant anti-black slant of the media. Nobody asks, does the media have a racial bias? That's one of those subjects that's not allowed to be brought up. That's censored. That's a censored viewpoint. You cannot ask if there's an inherent racial slant in the media. if you try to bring it up, then they will all say, oh, no, the hell there isn't. No, you just don't understand the media. The white media's goal is to make anti-black racism a normal part of the public discourse, and they've largely been successful. But of course, there's a majority of the population who are predisposed to prefer this kind of mind rot, so that makes it a lot easier to sell the lie. The question is, what are we going to do in regards to this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep on banging the drum. We're going to continue to remind you who the bad guys are and why. We're not going to be giving a pass to any of the bootlicks, bedwenches, and bedbugs. We're not going to be allowing all of these crumbling satellites of white media to just freely spew their lies. They're going to get called out, they're going to get caught out, and they're going to be called in the carpet and held to account. But you've got to do your part. You see, the old black media, the dead black media, these bastards, they don't have the ability to be a force multiplier, and they don't have anyone who can act as a force multiplier for them. You, on the other hand, are our force multiplier. You're the ones who make it where what we say here reverberates to the point where it cannot be denied and cannot be ignored. No matter how few voices you may think the new voices of black media have, at the end of the day, as long as we've got your voice, we have all the influence and all the reach that we need. Yes, it's an uphill battle. No, we have not even made it a 1/1000th of the way to where we need to be, but the point is we have started the process. At this point, we stay the course. So you make sure that what you see here and what you hear in places like this, you repeat it. Make sure that you do your part so that as many people as possible hear this, not merely for the fact that we're trying to convert people. I am on no mission to convert anyone, but it's a matter of we want to make sure that the same way that the white media does everything that they can to shove their lies down people's throats whether they want it or not, we have got to be twice as adamant, twice as dogged, twice as determined. That people are going to hear the truth. They can scream and howl all they want. In fact, that's good. That lets us know that they heard it and what they saw was a shock to the system. I love it when they come screaming and howling. It lets me know that something that we said reached the bastards. And that's what we got to make sure of. We have got to be the ultimate agitators. We have got to be the ultimate irritant to white supremacy. They're feeling very comfortable, very full of themselves, having it all their own way. They never hear anything that they don't want to hear, never see anything they don't want to see. We're going to upset the bastard's apple cart. We're going to make it where they're going to hear this. They're going to come into contact with this. And they're going to be wondering, where's this stuff coming from and why won't it stop? It's not going to stop because black empowerment is irresistible. We understand that the white media is at war with us. Do your part. Open your mind, open your mouth, and yes, open your wallet. And let the bastards know that we are now officially, finally at war with them.